Hey everybody, welcome to My Counselor Live. I'm Tori, and today I'm joined by one of our amazing counselors here at My Counselor Online, Shaun Lotter, and I'm just so excited to get to talk with you, Shaun, and hear more about you and your heart for what you do. And so even just to start out, I would love to just kind of hand you the mic and let you take a moment to introduce yourself to the viewers and the people watching. Tell them a bit about yourself and what you do here.
Yeah, Tori, I am one of the counselors here at MyCounselor.Online, and kind of have an area of focus working with marriages, in particular marriage struggles and marriage infidelity. That's something that I'm really passionate about helping couples work through, and am really blessed to get to do that here at MCO. Been with the group here for about 11 years now. Was at another place, working kind of totally different kind of mental health, more inpatient residential, the 10 years prior to that. But just love what I get to do here at this point in my career, getting help couples walk through, especially infidelity issues.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and so important. And I don't feel like there's a lot of Christian counselors that
Mhm.
have a lot of expertise in that area and really pour into it. So I think that that is really awesome. I'd love to know, did you always want to be a counselor or?
Yeah, I had somewhat of an idea that I might end up doing some sort of counseling in undergrad. But if you asked me then, is that just exactly what you want to be doing? I really didn't know at that point.
Who knows? Who knows at
Who
that point?
knows?
We all end up kind of flip-flopping.
Yeah. Yeah. So I ended up just following where the Lord led me. Got working in the field, like I said, in kind of a residential setting, working with kids and adolescents, and enjoyed doing that. And the natural progression of that was to pursue getting some advanced degrees, getting licensure as a counselor, to be able to do more working with people. And so things just kind of went from there. Found out that I liked it, I enjoyed doing it, and took the step to join MyCounselor.Online and step into this world of practice. And here I am today.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, you're such a great part of the team here at My Counselor Online. And I know that there are so many individuals and marriages that you are able to speak into with such wisdom and just real compassion and a desire to see marriages thrive. And I just think that that is so awesome. You guys, if you are just now hopping on the live, welcome. We're so happy you're here. If you're watching the replay, also welcome. We're happy you're here too. And you guys, if you think of questions along the way, feel free to comment those. Feel free to inbox us. You can always submit them at mycounselor.online/ask. And we're going to have a short Q&A portion kind of toward the end of our episode today. But I'm really excited, Shaun, because we get to talk through one of your articles. So you've written a few articles on the website, and you guys can always go check those out and just look up Shaun's name. But Shaun, I would love to just talk about your article, Betrayed Spouses Prep for Disclosure of Affair, Porn, and Sex Addiction. This is a heavy title, just
Yeah.
right off the bat. And I would just love if we could start by having you kind of explain who this article was written to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the purpose, the direction of this article is for couples in the very, very beginning of infidelity recovery. We have couples coming in, and we have a spouse who is the spouse who acted out, the spouse who stepped outside the marriage, and then we have the spouse who was betrayed, who was injured in this. And one of the first steps for couples going through this process, if they want to work on recovery in the marriage, is to lay a foundation of truthfulness. And so this idea of disclosure is a very intentional process where we walk through as a couple, laying the groundwork of here's what's happened. Here's the reality of what's going on, so that we can have that foundation to work from in the future. And so this article is written to help the injured spouse, the betrayed spouse, navigate that process, kind of prepare themselves to be ready for what they're about to do in this really important step in recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. Is this mainly for your couples who you're working with, like in marriage counseling, or would you say this could apply to anyone who is working through this?
I think it could apply to anyone who's working through this. Although what I will say is it's really, really important for couples in the midst of this to make sure that they seek help from somebody who really has an expertise and a focus in walking couples through this particular issue. I don't find that it goes particularly well for couples if they just say, hey, we're just going to kind of do this on our own. Not because they're not intelligent or capable, not because they don't really want to work on their marriage, but simply because to use kind of a word picture, it would be like two people who are injured in hospital beds saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and take care of ourselves. We're going to heal ourselves. We're going to get up and do this whole thing while they're both very injured. And so just like that, you know, if we're injured physically, we would need help when we're injured emotionally, like this. Trying to do this all on our own, sort through this, is not really the most helpful thing to do. And so I would encourage, you know, couples, you know, to have somebody on their team, on the recovery team, who's an experienced counselor, in particular with this issue. That's one of the things that I come across a lot with couples when I work with them, is maybe in the past that they've worked with somebody who kind of practices but doesn't have a focus in this area. And we're big believers here at MyCounselor.Online that none of us can be experts on every type of counseling. It's impossible to do that. And so what we try to do is really have areas of focus, and this happens to be mine. And so I would recommend to, you know, couples out there that you find somebody that this is their passion, this is their focus, this is where they really spend time learning and growing and trying to help people, because just somebody who generally maybe does counseling across a lot of issues may not have the depth of knowledge or focus in this area to be really helpful here.
Yeah, no, that's excellent advice. I think I noticed that a lot of times we tend to either kind of isolate ourselves in our hurt, or as, you know, the injured person or whatnot, or just kind of let in like a friend or a mentor, someone, you know, who is great to talk to and bounce thoughts off at times, but can't really speak into it with the wisdom and advice that someone like you could.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we want to encourage people. It's not that the counselor is the end all be all in the situation. It's not that I operate and when I'm working with couples and say, hey guys, I'm what you need. It's more, I fill that counselor role. And definitely as you're speaking there, you know, thinking for couples who work through recovery successfully, that they have a recovery team. They really have a number of people around them that support them and encourage them, including mentors and friends who are safe and supports. And so all those people are really, really important in this process.
Right. Yeah. No, just having that community around you kind of championing, you know, your marriage and you guys, and so important. So my next question would kind of be, you know, you talk extensively in the article about, you know, the purpose of coming to talking about this, you know, and the purpose of that conversation, which can be a really hard conversation. And one thing that you mentioned, kind of a quote that you give, is that it is relinquishing control of information. I guess more toward the spouse, you know, that is struggling with the infidelity, that is the person who did that, or whatnot. And so can you expand on this idea of what relinquishing control of information is?
Yeah. So infidelity of all kinds kind of has an anchor or a foundation in dishonesty. I really haven't found too many situations where infidelity can thrive without dishonesty, without covering things up.
Yeah.
And, you know, covering things up is about having control of the truth. If I'm, you know, betraying my spouse, what I'm doing is and they don't know what I'm doing is I'm saying, I'm going to know important parts of our reality, and I'm not going to let you in on that. I'm not going to let you be aware of what's going on here. I'm going to have control over that. And that's really, really how infidelity can kind of exist, how it can thrive and grow into something really destructive. And that is that we have that kind of deception. And so this idea of relinquishing control, of the truth is an active in a very intentional step in saying, I'm going to be fully honest and fully known by you. I'm not going to control how much of our reality you know anymore. I'm going to be, a good word for it would be, I'm going to be transparent with you. Oftentimes, betraying spouses or those who've had infidelity of any kind have a longing to be trusted again. They'll say, when will come a point where I can be trusted again by my spouse? When will be a point they'll lean into me? And I'll say, hey, one of the best things that you can do if you're going to ask for that from them is to allow them to have transparency, to trust them knowing the details of what's happened. You take the first step. You take the first step in allowing them to know the truth. You trust them with that truth, and you're going to be in a better position. They're going to be in a better position to actually trust you as a spouse again.
Yeah, like trusting you kind of moving forward from that point, because everything has been disclosed. You know what happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you talk through 4 areas of responsibility that the person who's disclosing the information should talk through. Can you just talk through each of those reasons, those 4?
Absolutely. So we break down disclosure into those 4 areas, kind of 4 focus areas of here's what I need to provide to my betrayed spouse. Here's what I need to give them. And the very first thing that we talk about is I need to give an accounting of my actions. And this is pretty straightforward. I'm gonna tell you what I've done. I'm going to tell you what I've done. I'm going to tell you where I've lied to you, where I've been when I said I was other places. I'm gonna be open about my actions. I'm going to share those clearly with you. The second area is probably a little bit more difficult to open up about, and this is where I share things that I used as things that were my justifications and my thoughts around this. This is where things get a little bit ugly for the couple in recovery, because we're really dredging up some pretty toxic thinking in that. And the purpose of that is not to say my toxic thinking was right. The purpose of that is to expose it. The purpose of that is to begin rooting out toxic thinking. And so we talk about sharing our motivations and our justifications, and to label them specifically that. To say, for example, if a betraying spouse shares, I was so angry with you, and I justified because I was angry with you that I should be able to do this. I should be able to step outside the marriage. That's a really ugly thing to have to say. But as we're getting honest, it's an important thing to be able to own and expose that to the light, and to say, here's my thought process in this. Here's what was wrong in the road that I was going down as a person. Because the answer to me being angry is not, I get to go do this. The answer to that is many other things, like us working on our relationship and figuring out how to heal. And so this is, really personal. This is bringing out some of those ways that I have, justified and reasoned through.
Yeah, that's
what
so
it is
hard.
I'm doing.
Think, you look at it, and from the outside perspective, you think infidelity or an affair or something, and you just see that. But when you get down to like the nitty gritty root of it, and those justifications, it's so much deeper, and the roots are so much deeper. And so there's so much more to work through than just, I had an affair,
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why we don't just stop at our actions, because, an injured spouse, betrayed spouse, instinctively deep down knows that that's true. They know that you didn't just step out of the marriage. Like, what were you thinking?
Right.
What was your thought process? What were your motivations? Not just, like you said, I had an affair and I shouldn't have, and I wish I didn't.
Right. Because it's
Like,
like if you don't talk through the root of it, it's like you work on the affair and then
mhm,
there's still all of this underlying
mhm,
stuff that you didn't talk about that
mhm.
could, lead to worse or lead to more.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of a. We'll share with people. It's behavioral interventions. If we leave it at just behavioral, doesn't work. And what we mean by behavioral in this kind of context is basically, here's how you acted, here's how you ought to be, kind of. And so if we just know and anchor in how we're supposed to be, that's going to fix everything. And I'm not against taking steps to live the way that we need to, but just staying, if we just do that part, we're going to miss an awful lot in what we need to uncover. A third area is emotionally, exposing that. What am I feeling? What are my feelings around this? Um, for a lot of betraying spouses, they're kind of shocked to be asked this sometimes, because they think, especially if they're broken, about what they've done. Sometimes people come in and they feel very, very broken about having been unfaithful to their spouse, and they'll have so much shame that they'll say, what does it matter what I feel? That doesn't matter at all. We should only be talking about what my spouse feels. There's no room for me. I did this. I deserve what I get. Um, it doesn't matter. And actually, believe it or not, for betrayed spouses, for your injured partner, it's actually incredibly helpful to them. It's incredibly important to them to know what you're feeling. Um, One of the comments that is so common for a betrayed spouse is, yeah, things like, what did they feel? Did they feel this as much as I feel this?
Right. I
Did they
just think,
hurt the way that I hurt?
right. Like I think of, wanting to know, do they feel remorse? Like, do they feel regret over
Mhm.
this?
Mhm. Are they in pain today?
Mm,
Because I woke up and I was hurting.
yeah.
Or are they just over it? Was their day fine? And what's sad about that, a lot of times, is out of that shame, the betraying spouse doesn't share. And so the message to their betrayed spouse is, I wasn't thinking about it today. I moved on today, which in so many cases is not true at all. And so it's actually really helpful for the betraying spouse to be able to be vulnerable in that way, and to be able to say, I'm so incredibly sad. I feel it right now, to be, or whatever it is, that they're open with what they're feeling in the struggle that this is. Because we're asking, the betrayed spouse to do the same thing, to be open with what they feel. And so, one-sided vulnerability doesn't feel very good. If they're the only one opening up about what they feel, that doesn't feel very good. So for, betrayed spouse to have that connection there with their partner is so important. And then finally, another aspect, or the last aspect of this, is we encourage uh, our spouses who stepped outside of the marriage to take time to share and identify and share the damage that they've caused via their actions. When people are in infidelity of all different kinds, it's important for their partners to understand that in so many cases, they may not necessarily be letting themselves think about the ramifications of what they're doing. And it isn't because, a lot of times people will misinterpret that and say, well, it's because they're so in love with this other person, or it's because they are so infatuated with porn, or whatever it is that they're being unfaithful with. And I'm not arguing that they may not have feelings for that other person. I'm not arguing that there's not pleasure in the sexual addiction behaviors that they're engaging in. but at its root, not letting ourselves identify what we're doing and the damage we're doing is really a form of denial. It's about protecting ourselves from the pain rather than enjoying the pleasure. And so it's really important as a betraying spouse is hearing this, that they know that whether or not a spouse was thinking about, what they were doing really has less to do with whether or not they care about you. It has more to do with them protecting themselves, protecting the fantasy of what they're doing. Because you can imagine, if you're out being unfaithful, if you really let yourself think about what it is you're doing, if you really think about the damage maybe that it's doing to your children or your wife or the people around you, what that's going to do is that's going to be just such a heavy weight, distracting you and pulling you out of the situation that you're trying to just enjoy and just step into. And so that's not something that people typically do. They just carry that and are thinking about that. What they do is they compartmentalize that and say, I'm not going to think about the damage that I'm doing. I'm not going to think about what this is causing in that. And so when we sit down, when a betrayed spouse gets to hear their partner own that and say, here's what I've done. Here's the damage that I've caused. I own that. That's really important for both of them. That's important for that betrayed spouse to hear that and, okay, they're taking ownership and stepping out of denial. And for the betraying partner, it's really important because part of healing is being honest with ourselves. Part of healing is being honest with ourselves. So when we own the damage that we've caused, we're taking steps, initial steps to go out of denial and into being really honest.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good. Are there any, boundaries that the betrayed or the betraying spouse, needs to respect as far as, being transparent and bringing things into the light? What's too much to share and what's, not enough, and where's the balance?
Well, probably the first boundary that I find myself going over is understanding the nature of what I would come at from a theological vantage point. Some people watching this may not have kind of a biblical frame of reference. That may not be how they do life, but that's kind of my framework and understanding is that when we engage in a destructive behavior, Bible would call it sin, we don't flip a light switch and come out of that. We don't just, for instance, I'll hear somebody say, well, they just need to decide to be honest. And I'll say, you know what, they've really done damage to their capacity to be honest. Okay, and it's important you understand that they have done damage by engaging in this to their capacity to be honest. And so the very first boundary that I will recommend and I'll set with both spouses, I'll say, listen, to use the betraying spouse, you've damaged your capacity to be honest, and I need to start helping you, and others need to start helping you regain that. You can't flip a light switch and be honest in the way that you need to be. You really need help. Okay? For the betrayed spouse, what I want to highlight to them is say, listen, you could push for and say, I want you to tell me everything right now. But the reality is your partner is going to need to be very intentional and get help opening up, taking some time to prepare this disclosure. And so what I need you to do right now is I need you to wait. I know that's such a hard thing to ask for, but I need you to wait for them to prepare this. I need you to give them time. Don't be pressing right now. Don't be pushing right now, at least in the immediate time frame. They need to be working on this, okay? And usually we don't like to have full disclosure happen we want to have it happen within the first 30 days. Doesn't always take the first 30 days, but we've got to regain our capacity to be honest with ourselves. And probably the second important boundary, and you're kind of alluding to that, is like, well, how much information to put out there. We have a rule of thumb here that we want to know what is helpful to us to be able to heal, to understand the reality of what's happened. But I don't want to know a level of detail that's going to be creating graphic and traumatic mental imagery for myself. That's really important for people to hear. You know, it's one thing to know, for example, I'll give an example, you know, when I talk with people to have your betrayed spouse come to you and say, you know, on such and such week, you know, I coordinated with my affair partner. We decided to meet up at a hotel that week. You know, I lied to my boss on Tuesday of that week and told him I was running errands or on a sales call, and I met my infidelity partner at this particular hotel in town. I paid for the room. We met. We had unprotected sex. I was there about an hour, and then I left and came home to you that evening. Now that's a painful thing to hear, but that's also a level of detail that is clear, saying here's exactly what I did. Here's exactly what I did. Here's how we did that. You know, it's unhelpful. It's destructive if I come at it from a very vague perspective, because I'm still evading and denying. You know, if I explain that same story and I said, well, at some points, you know, my affair partner and I did meet up for sex. I really regret that. I shouldn't have done that. And, you know, I'm really changing. I'm so sorry. Okay. There's almost nothing to grab onto there and actually know what happened. Right. So that's one ditch that we can end up in. The other ditch would be getting graphic with, for instance, sexually, here's what we did. You know, when we met up, here's what we were wearing. Here's you know, things that we were acting out, or, you know, whatever it is. Now that betrayed spouse is going to have pictures, vivid pictures in their mind that are not necessarily helping them heal. They certainly know more, but it's not helping them heal. And so all that to say, one of the boundaries that I'll share with betrayed spouses, injured spouses, is don't confuse knowing more information with healing. Sometimes people get locked into that. They almost get locked into the relief that knowing some new piece of information brings them, and they confuse that with healing. And what happens is they almost, in a way, almost begin acting like an addict themselves when it comes to the truth. Tell me a little bit more. I've thought about this other little tidbit, and if you would just tell me. And they press for that. They press for it. Give me this information. Give me that. Give me this. Give me that. And as their spouse gives them that, they get just a temporary, like, okay, I know. And then shortly after that, you know, in their distress, they need another fix. They need another hit. So a second boundary that I'll share with betrayed spouses is, hey, don't confuse knowing information with healing. Don't confuse, like, if you could just know more, you could heal more. If you could know more, you would trust more. You know, because if you're caught in that cycle, we need to identify that ultimately is going to be a destructive cycle for you. That ultimately is about you trying to cope with what it is you're feeling, and maybe being overwhelmed in that, not knowing how to do that, and you're doing this thing where maybe just asking a question kind of makes that feel better for just a little bit. And so those would be, you know, two boundaries when it comes to information. We want to be clear. We want to provide a real honest picture of what's going on, but we don't want to be graphic. We want to give some time to really root out the truth, because we're recognizing that part of the injury of infidelity is diminishing our capacity to be honest with ourselves and our spouse.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Great advice. Just sharing only what's helpful. And I just love I love that quote of don't confuse more information with healing. And I think, you know, that can apply to a lot of areas. But yeah, especially this. So is 100% healing even possible, you know, after something like this?
Absolutely. And to use that phrase, I say, yes, absolutely. It's possible. It's doable. And maybe to reframe that for people, healing from any major life event, whether it be infidelity or loss of a loved one, any number of things that we go through, you know, in life, because there's pain in life. Our goal is not to recreate the past. Healing is not going back to a time when this didn't happen, because that's not reality. Nobody's ever at peace chasing what used to be. And so when it comes to all forms of healing and loss, it really is about taking what we've been through and creating something new. It's about creating a marriage that is awesome, that is strong, that is healing from something that is now a part of our story. We're not denying it. We're not going back to a time when we pretend this didn't happen. And with that being said, I want to be clear, as we grieve well and move forward, you can expect that you and your spouse are not thinking about this all the time, that it's not central in your life the way that it is today. I think that really is what people are afraid of. They are in the initial throes of this infidelity coming out, and they're like, oh my gosh, am I ever not going to feel the way that I feel today? Am I ever not going to focus on this the way that I focus on it today? And I say, absolutely, that's totally possible. In fact, couples in recovery who work recovery well will tell you, once they're past healing, that they're not thinking about the infidelity every day. They're not in that place. And on the other side of this, they built a marriage in so many cases that is better than, that is stronger than, that is more secure than the one they had prior to the infidelity. And with that being said, I don't mean that in the way that we're ever glad that the infidelity happens. I always want to be clear with people, if I were to have you talk with couples who are so glad for where they're at today, they're not turning around and saying, boy, we're just glad that the infidelity happened. But what they did do is they accepted their reality. They grieved it. They worked through that recovery process, and now they're in a place of having a really, really awesome marriage, really awesome relationship. And they moved to a place where they are not raw, with what it is that happened, but they've really moved on.
Yeah. I hope that people watching right now, if you're in this place, just feel hope.
Mm-hmm.
Hope for that healing, and hope of grieving well,
Mm-hmm.
and then, moving forward with your spouse. And Shaun, I would just love if you could maybe just end with a word of encouragement for the readers of this article who are preparing for that really hard conversation.
Absolutely. I would just want to say first that my heart goes out to you. I feel so much compassion towards you, being in a situation that you didn't cause. You didn't ask to be in this. And so I just want to first express, that. And I want to share with you that healing is not only possible, it's likely, it's going to happen if you'll do the things in recovery that need to be done. It's not are you strong enough to heal? It's not a matter of, do you have what it takes? It's a matter of, are you just willing to do what you need to do? Are you willing to take these steps? And if you are, with help, not looking for you to do that on your own, but with help, you can absolutely heal. And I have yet, honestly, to see the situation, because sometimes people respond and will say, well, you don't know my situation. You don't know what it is that I have been through, what I've had to deal with. And I'll just say, I have yet to find the situation, the marriage, that cannot heal in a spectacular way if both people are really actively a part and engaged in this recovery process, which is really amazing to me. It says something about our capacity with God's help to heal. Is just, the circumstance is less important than what we're willing to do today. And so I just want to encourage those people with that be encouraged. This healing works, recovery works, which is what makes me so thankful for what I get to do day in and day out.
Awesome. So good, Shaun. Thank you so much for just sharing your heart behind that article. So good. And I hate to like just jump into the next little segment, but I'm also, just as excited to pick your brain about this. We just got to talk about, affairs and infidelity and just the maybe unsafe feelings that kind of come up from that. And a trending topic right now, people are searching it, people are asking questions about it, is psychological safety. And I even think, that can kind of tie into maybe some of what people battle with in the midst of healing from infidelity. And so I would love to just talk about psychological safety. What is it? What are some practical tips that you would give as a counselor to create that?
Yeah. So when people talk about being safe, and there's physical safety, which is, my body and physically is, am I free from threat? Am I in danger of being harmed? Am I not being in danger of being harmed? And then when we look at it as what you're saying, more of a psychological safety kind of piece. And so, contrary to what people may think, being safe actually, in most cases, especially psychologically, starts with me. My safety starts with me, which is interesting because a lot of times we assume that our safety starts with the people around us. But that simply is not true, at least in the case of adults. There is a time in our life where our safety, including our psychological safety, really is dependent on those around us. And that time of life is obviously childhood.
Right.
But once we become adults, we really do step into this role of being the primary keeper of our safety. And so being psychologically safe, what I would think about, with somebody is things like, do I know how to be wise in the types of people and the types of situations I allow myself to be in, the people I allow myself to be around. Who am I gravitating towards? Who am I attempting to form relationships with in that? What does that look like, for me? Being psychologically safe also means, what's my capacity, and probably really significant is, what's my capacity to be honest with myself? Because in a lot of cases, when we're looking at psychological safety, there's a lot that I need to look at in me. I really need to take the focus as much as I can off of what's outside here, and I really need to bring it back here, which takes a lot of courage to do. And in many cases, being psychologically safe means that you may need some help being able to see yourself, being able to put the focus here, being able to understand what's going on with you in here. In that, that's where, a counselor, in some cases a mentor, and other things can be helpful to you. But really, as I think about this idea of being safe, it is centrally my responsibility. It's centrally like, what is going on in me? Because out of what's going on in me is how I'm going to interact with the world. It's how I'm going to maybe remove myself from relationships that are dangerous. It's how I'm going to learn how to find people that are caring and safe people to be around. It's how I'm going to learn to identify the difference between a mistake or a hurt that happens in a healthy relationship and injury that happens in a toxic relationship. And so those are just some thoughts with that. I'm really big believer in myself, that I need to look here a lot. I need to understand here a lot what's going on with me when it comes to safety.
Yeah. Would you say that psychological safety and emotional safety are like two different things?
If I'm honest, I don't know, because a lot of it may come down to just what people are entering into a Google search in that. I think what people probably mean when they enter that, my guess would be, they're just looking for this idea of how can I relate to a world where there's pain and there's hurt and there's hurting people? What does that look like? And how do I negotiate and make sense of my own pain as I try to interact with that world? I mean,
Yeah, I
that's
think a
kind of
lot of people are craving psychological, emotional safety right now,
Mhm.
through this year.
Yeah. And so probably that's the thrust behind it. And so it's a really big thing. I mean, that's a really complicated, question. It's more than just, how do I relate in the sense of how do I know what a safe relationship is? It has to do with grieving, because it's not a question of whether or not you'll have to grieve in this life. It's will you, and will you do that well?
Mm,
How will you navigate and heal from pain, which is inevitable in
right.
life? How will you deal with things like what you have control over and what you don't? And so my hunch would be people entering that. There's probably a whole host of things that are going in, to that those keystrokes that they're entering into the search engine.
Yeah, well, how about we just talk for a minute about, if that is the kind of heart behind why people are, searching this and looking for answers about this, what are some maybe practical ways to feel that, like, emotional, psychological, whatever sort of safety,
Mhm.
especially with everything happening in the world right now.
Mhm.
What would you suggest as a counselor in kind of achieving that?
So probably one of the most important things, is actually counter to what maybe many people would initially think, um, which would be we actually need to get very good at being able to feel, kind of at our core what our core emotions are, which is different than maybe what people are thinking. Because when people say I want to feel safe, many times what they're saying is I want to get away from whatever this experience is inside of me. I want to numb this. I want to make this go away. And believe it or not, the harder we try to do that, the worse off we are. And so, as I talk with people, there are certain emotions that are things that we feel that are not quite at the core of what we're actually, like our core emotions. So things that people feel, which are kind of hamster wheel emotions, would be things like being stuck in anxiety or being stuck in shame, stuck in guilt, those kinds of things. And what we really need to be able to do is go underneath of those and to be able to connect with actual core emotions like fear or like sadness, like anger, those kinds of things. And to be able to get close to those and to be able to connect with those, and to be able to connect with others on those. People are amazed to find out that as they do that, as they're able to do that, they go from wanting to numb everything to becoming resilient and being able to face what's out there, which is a really important and fundamental and a very important shift that needs to take place. We go from I need the world to be safe, I need the world to be what I need it to be, to I can be resilient in the world that I have. I can be resilient with reality. And that because I'm now doing what I'm designed to do, what God has made me to do, to be able to process through what it is that's happening and to access, to kind of build up that resiliency and to be able to go out, as one man put it just the other day in session. He said, I feel like I can get up again.
Mm.
I feel like I can get up and go out and do what I need to do now. And we just taken time to connect with those emotions in him. It really does bring out your capacity for being resilient.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I even think of just like mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
and just the importance of, you know, finding those root problems and just sort of like,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing it and kind of naming it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good. Awesome. Well, thank you for kind of expanding on that a little bit for us. And I hope that was able to encourage some of the people watching right now, especially with everything happening. I'm sure, we're all craving some safety and we're all wanting that. And so I just appreciate that. So I want to jump into this next portion of the episode, which
Mm-hmm.
is the Q&A. So,
Okay.
I have some questions that were sent in. Our viewers maybe already know this, but if you don't, you can always send us questions. You can comment them, inbox them, submit them on MyCounselor.Online/ask. And we love being able to answer your questions with one of our counselors. And, we do this every Wednesday, My Counselor Live, and it's just such a joy for me, for our counselors, to be able to interact with y'all in this way. So I'm going to jump into this first question that was submitted to us. And this, is something that I'm sure that you can speak into really well, Shaun, as someone who specializes in affair recovery and infidelity struggles in marriages. But this person said, I need help to stop cheating on my partner. We're both Christians, but I am still seeing other ladies. What do I do?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the courage in asking that. One of the things that I like to tell, especially spouses who are engaged in infidelity, is I'm not interested in adding to your shame. I really am interested in helping you move out of this. And so just encouraged by the courage that it takes to ask that. And probably, the what I would say if that person were in front of me would be, who else in your world kind of knows and is helping you with how powerless you are in this. Oftentimes, as I talk with people, there may be nobody on that list apart from maybe a few times in prayer with God, saying, God, I feel powerless. And to that, I would say to gentlemen in this situation, it's so important that we really actively invite people into that powerlessness, men into that powerlessness who can help us. When we're dealing with a problem like this, where it's like, I'm doing this and I can't seem to get a hold of it, we really are probably dealing with some pretty strong addictive dynamics. And addiction is not insurmountable. It isn't at all. It just has certain requirements to work through healing. And one of those requirements is that we really engage in supports who are going to help us. And that's not simply, just somebody who we connect with once in a while, a friend or something like that, and we talk about how bad we feel. It's actually like we need to be a part of a 12-step group. We need to take that initiative to reach out and to do that. We really need counseling from somebody who specializes in, who can be helpful in this addiction area. And out of that, have the support that we need to start taking the next steps in recovery in that. So just encourage that person for stepping out, asking the question. Probably next steps would be, we need to get involved in that. We need to get involved in that 12-step support to get help with that addictive struggle.
Yeah, no, so good. And it's a vulnerable question to ask, but I appreciate that it was asked, because that just shows such initiative in recognizing, a struggle, and being able to, like you have said, name it and work through it. So super good. The next question we got was also sent in to us on Facebook. This person said, how do I start to heal from codependency and identify who I really am in the process?
Yeah. So for people that don't know, codependency, I think an easy way to understand, or a helpful way to understand codependency is really like, how do I negotiate forming meaningful connections or attachments and relationships with other people and really still maintain a sense of myself and who I am. That people who are wrestling with codependency, they're a very, very normal and natural longing to have meaningful connection and relationship with others, but people who struggle with codependency, and it usually goes back to childhood trauma in most cases, they're trying to form those connections, but what ends up happening is they don't really have a sense of themselves in the relationship, and the relationship takes on a whole other dynamic that ends up being destructive. And so what I would say is great, that you're recognizing that with the codependency. And the next things that I would do, one of the workbooks that I'll recommend is by a lady named Pia Melody. or kind of a funny first name, or unfamiliar, it's PIA and then Melody. But she's really an expert in the area of codependency, and she's written some really, really helpful books and workbooks, along with some colleagues of hers, that I will really strongly recommend that people who know they have codependency start reading and working through. It isn't that we can't talk about those things in counseling, but I always want to be doing everything I can to be bolstering that person in their recovery. And I've just found that her materials and things are very, very helpful. Really start helping people grab hold of what's going on with them. The second thing that I recommend with codependency is something similar to an Al-Anon group. Which these are spouses of those with addictions, and the idea in those groups in a lot of cases is we're learning how to deal with this codependency phenomenon. We're learning how to navigate this in a kind of a 12-step format, similar to what the person on the other end is doing with their addiction. We're working on in our codependency, and that really facilitates having the kind of help and encouragement and support that we need. Because when we admit that we're codependent, one of the things that Al-Anon and other groups will say is we admit our powerlessness in it, which is really significant. Similar to on the addiction side, I admit my powerlessness in this addiction. This is an admission of, boy, this is really strong, and I'm powerless, and I need God's help, and I need the help of others to navigate that. And then finally, as a step with that, working with a counselor who is skilled and experienced in the area of helping with codependency is another part of kind of that recovery, that healing in that.
That's good. Yeah, awesome. I hope that was encouraging to the person who asked this question. I think, that's great advice. And I appreciate you even recommending like some resources and specific books and, authors that are helpful to read. I want to ask this last question, and this goes back to struggles with addiction. Specifically just, around sexual sin and struggle and different things. But this person said, how do I get rid of my masturbation addiction?
Yeah. So again, that's a brave, question to be asking, to put that out there. And what I want to say to that person is there can be shame, in addictive behaviors, but in some cases, I think there's a whole other level of shame when the addictive behaviors are sexual in nature. And so appreciate them, being willing to ask that. And what I would share with them is we need to kind of undo some of the aloneness probably that they feel in that situation. Being a part of a sexual addictions group would be an important part of that. To be in a group of people, preferably, same-sex people, that can get it, that can go, hey, we are working through being powerless in this too. We're working through facing this too. Because one of the struggles with especially sexual addiction is the aloneness. And aloneness brings about lots of shame. It brings about a lot of isolation, and isolation is painful for people. It's not neutral. A lot of times people think that just being alone is sad, but not that bad. And I say, no, it's extremely painful. That injures us when we feel so alone. And so undoing that aloneness by having a group like that is really, really important, because you're not going to have the strength to change any of that as you're alone, as you're by yourself. And the second thing that I would want, to recommend with that is working with a competent sexual addictions counselor, because masturbation is something that regardless of people's views on it, is something that majority people have done at some point in their life. And so what we're dealing with is a behavior that may be present or has been present in somebody's life, but has now turned into something that is compulsive. And usually when that's happening, we really are talking with somebody who has some trauma or some significant pain in relationships as they grew up. And so it's important to have, a counselor that you're working with to address that.
Yeah, that's good. So good. Shaun, I just appreciate you speaking into all of these different things and just your expertise around sexual struggles and, infidelity struggles and all of that. And it's needed, especially in the church, especially in this, specific area. I think that it's so needed to have people who can speak into it the way that you can. So I appreciate you giving up your time and your energy to just sit with me for the past hour and talk with us, interact with the viewers and the people watching. But thank you so much for that, Shaun. And you guys, thank you for joining us today for My Counselor Live. I hope that some of what Shaun had to say and we talked about today was able to encourage you, whether you're watching live right now or you're watching the replay. We're so happy that you stuck around with us and showed up today. And if you have any questions, anything that you want to ask one of our counselors, you can always ask. You can always submit that, MyCounselor.Online/ask, or inbox it to us right here on Facebook. But Shaun, any of the last words, anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, no, I'm just so glad to have gotten to be here today speaking with you guys, and just anybody, listening out there, just let them know that we love what we get to do, helping with people, and would be, thrilled to be a part of that with you.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you for joining us. We will see you next Wednesday for another episode of My Counselor Live.